Thank you very much, Rebecca. And folks, thank you for attending. I'm like a cow walking through the tall grass. I'm utterly tickled to help you guys out in your weed control issues. So as she said, I've been here for just a short year as a manufacturing rep for Allegheny Company. But I'm going to go through a lot of different things here. We're going to get away from the water edge that you've been talking about and and in the water to get you to the edge of the water and then in the terrestrial side. What's that? So the first series of slides are going to be some of the weeds you might encounter in that shift of going from fully aquatic into the terrestrial. So let's start out with this one. This is a plant that grows about, 5 foot tall. This one, unlike like cattails and that, can actually survive just outside of the area of influence. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the riparian area and what that means and how that can affect you as a landowner. But you can see the tip of the boat here, and we pulled the boat up there, and then I could actually just walk over there. And I stand 6'2", so you can see how tall these can get, and they just love to grow. Like 70% of all of our plants that we have that become noxious, this is an escaped ornamental in the areas, start to get pretty thick. You can see it's approaching right into the native cattails. So that's one of the bigger ones to watch out for. Another one that we see all over the place is this escaped ornamental tree called salt cedar. It's also known as tamarisk. This good old tree has completely destroyed some of the Colorado drainage areas. It can grow in the water, or as you can see right here, it's growing right along the up in the gravel areas. These were planted as ornamentals. You can still see these in people's lawns. It is a beautiful juniper-like tree, and it gets a pink bloom that starts blooming in about mid-July, and it'll bloom all the way into September. That's why everybody likes to plant it. But the bad problem about this critter is it absorbs so much water, and it'll also drip a sap, if you'll call it that, underneath the tree in many areas and turn it white, hence all of the salt. Makes it very difficult. Apologize for the picture, but Phragmites, this giant reed, this is a picture taken up in the Salt Lake area, and and it'll actually totally grow along the waterways, lakes, streams. This critter will get up there about 10, 12 foot tall if it has the chance to, and it'll choke out all of the vegetation. There is a native Phragmites plant that you need to watch out for. And if you think you've got one or the other, make sure you call a weed professional, because if it is the giant reed instead of the native reed Phragmites, then we need to know that, because you don't want to get it started. It is very, very difficult to control. And we can get into some of the thistles. This here, you'll see this quite often, even in your lawn. You'll see it quite often in pastures. You'll see it along the waterways. It's bull thistle, or if you look at the different size and kind of flower head, you'll have musk thistle. You'll also get Scotch thistle as well. Bull thistle grows about 5 foot tall. The musk thistle will go 6, 7 foot tall. And I've seen the Scotch thistle up over 12 foot tall. The leaves are all different. And so this is one of them, a great little weed of concern. One of the newer weeds we're starting to see encroaching in a lot of area is this weed called horseweed or mare's tail. Now, this is an annual plant. It grows about 3 feet tall. It gets these very little bitty yellow to a light white pink flower on it, and it is very, very aggressive. We'll talk a little bit later on about resistant weed management, but a lot of these that are annuals become resistant to a lot of the herbicides that we're using. And resistance is not the plant changing genetically. It's actually like one of us can get a cold and next person won't get that same cold. And so when you use the herbicide works on one plant, but not the other. And now that plant seeds out and promotes more. And we'll talk about how to manage that a little bit later on. One of the worst weeds we get in a lot of our riparian areas, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this, is what's known as hoary cress or white top. You'll get it very thick right now in the Boise Valley, over in the Baker City area, down in Utah, up in there. Everywhere you're at is probably starting to bloom. This is one of the earliest plants to go into bloom. It is in the mustard family, but unique and different than your tumble mustard or your blue mustard. This is a rhizomatous plant. So the picture I just pulled up there, that is one plant all connected by roots. Very difficult to control because 80% of that plant is underground, and you need to use herbicides to go down there and get into that root system. Unfortunately, this is one of those weeds that, excuse me, mechanical weed control like digging or disking, rototilling, does nothing but spread the plant. This one, Canada thistle and field bindweed are the biggest ones for that. A new weed of concern in the Montana area, as well as you can welcome or thank Idaho for sending this up over the mountain from the salmon area, but this is rush skeleton weed. Rush skeleton weed is exactly that. It is a perennial aster family like dandelion. It actually has the white pitch to it, sap to it if you break off the stem, like a dandelion does. But uniquely, it has these little red downward facing hairs down by the stem. When you get more into the summertime, what it will look like, is that it'll look like an alfalfa plant that's been stripped by the grasshoppers. And that's due to the fact that by name, all of these rosette leaves on the bottom, like I said, it looks just like a dandelion. By about the 1st of June, they dry up and go away, and this stem is left behind, and it produces a little bitty yellow flower. So this one's one of those that Montana really wants you to keep a good eye out on, and it'll grow right next to your water, and it'll grow out in the driest lands that you have. Let's get into a little bit more of the aquatics that you don't want. This is a picture of flowering rush. Interesting enough, some of them produce this flower. It's a very beautiful, beautiful ornamental plant that escaped. This will choke out our native bulrush. It'll choke out cattails. It grows very aggressively. You can see how this is coming up next to the bank. And then if you start going to the left of the screen, you'll notice how it's just popping up. This is taken in a small canal, and it literally goes under the water and starts growing up the other bank. I don't have pictures of the root, but it looks like an iris, and it's another rhizomatous type plant. So all those rhizomes are little bulbets that connect one to the next, to the next, to the next. This one spreads a lot by people trying to clean it out of the ditch with a backhoe or a track hoe or even a shovel. And if you leave any of those fragments of those little bulbets in there, they will regrow. Up in Flathead Lake, as well as Lake Ponderay, because you know those two lakes are connected by a river, they find that the geese are spreading this more than anything, because when the waters recede, all of this green vegetation goes away in a matter of a few days. It just turns to mush. But the geese will land in there and start rooting around in there like a pig and popping those little roots out to feed on them. And then when the water comes back in, it comes up and floats away and starts a whole new weed patch somewhere else. It is one of the most difficult ones to control because we have yet found a herbicide that will control it. They are working on a biocontrol for this, so they've got an insect they're working on. It's very unique. And if you have any questions throughout my presentations about using bugs for weed control, please raise your hand or type it in the box. We can get into more detail. I did not plan on getting into that on this presentation too much because it's a whole new character in itself. But so that's kind of the deal. We're always trying to protect our water from aquatic invaders, and we're also trying to protect the terrestrial weeds from getting into those areas, because obviously weeds are going to occupy a site where they can get the least resistance and the most water, and that's going to be in that riparian area. So let's talk a little bit about riparian areas and where that's affect. This is now the area between the water and the upper land. So if you look at this, this is actually Fall Creek Falls here in Bonneville County. This is the Snake River, about 40 miles straight east of Idaho Falls. But if you look in this area, you can see where all the trees are growing, but you get up on these plateaus, it's all dry deserts. So anywhere these trees grow is called riparian. And that's where we really start to see new invaders coming in. For those landowners that have that area, that's the key place to go. You know, the deer and all the additional wildlife, this is where they like to hang out. They've got plenty of forage, they've got plenty of shelter, and they've got plenty of water. So let me back up just a little bit, talk a little bit about invasive grasses. Invasive annual grasses are going to be something that you're going to get more into the terrestrial side of the world, but you can see the riparian area is slightly down this canyon. But when that cheatgrass or downy brome, or even worse, Medusa head come in, it can change the fire regime. And then when those start on fire, the lightning strike or a careless campfire, it'll burn into those riparian areas, and then it totally torches them and takes out all that shelter. So if you're not sure what cheatgrass downy brome looks like, or Medusa head right here is, please talk to your weed professionals so that you can get a good idea of how to control it. More about the riparian areas. We get this all the time. When I was asked to do this presentation, they wanted to talk more about the terrestrial side, but you can see in the center of the picture, all the hay meadows down here and the cattle den, but you've got this tree zone, and then you've got the sagebrush. So I'm not going to talk too much about how to control weeds within this sagebrush step, but we're going to get a little more influence. Here's a little upper mountain pond that's got the bulrush. If you get this bulrush in your ponds and you want to keep it, that's fine. It's a good one to have. It's good habitat for ducks, geese, frogs, everything like that. But in the background, you can see how our Scotch thistle, our cheatgrass, and this is actually a little bit of hoary cress up in this corner, upper right-hand corner, that's being influenced by the water, and then they all come in and start invading and make it pretty difficult. Okay. My dog, you can see he's in quite a few of the pictures. He's my partner in crime. But in this little waterway, you've got aquatic plants submerged in the water. That can be talked about on a different case, but where all the willows are and doing that, this is where this terrestrial versus aquatics come into play. So let's talk about how to handle some of these aquatic. But I want to talk to you guys more about what are pesticides. You know, what is the chemicals we're out there? You know, with all chemicals, it is prescription drugs, household cleaners, pesticides are all chemicals. They're all man-made. We particularly use herbicides, okay? But if you start looking at anything to do with that in the water, you know well as I do, the dose is the poison. If the product label says to use 1 ounce of chlorsulfuron/Telar, you don't want to use 10 ounces. No different than if you looked at your prescription or a drug and an aspirin that says take 500 milligrams of something, you don't want to take 3,000 because your headache's worse. These products have been researched, studied by universities, by chemical companies, by the EPA. The rates that are on the label is all you really need. There's a range in there depending on plant vigor and all that. But it's just something I wanted to bring up, that all these products are registered. They are there. And they're a tool that we need to use. One of the big things that we need to understand in these riparian areas is not how much, but what do we mean by terrestrial? What do we might mean by aquatic? Where can we apply certain herbicides? Now, understand herbicides are a category of pesticides, but we strictly are talking about herbicides here, things that control plants. So if we're looking at waters of the US, these are natural free-flowing waters, can be lakes, ponds, creeks, streams, rivers. You have this area in the middle, which is the water. That's the aquatic area. And then you pretty much just have zone A on the inside, and then it just slowly creeps out. This is not an irrigation system. This is created by Mother Nature. It has not had a shovel in it, no backhoes, no nothing. A lot of our creeks in Idaho, like Montana, have been modified by the landowners and straightened out, but it's still waters of the US. Now, if you get into an irrigation ditch, it's a little bit different thing. You have on the left-hand part of the screen, you have the water. And then you have this zone B, which is in the inside slope of the ditch. Then you have zone C, which is the top. And some of the top of these canals, ditches, waterways will have roads on them. Some of them are just trails. Some of them are just go to an apex and then disappear. Then you have what we call the zone D outside of the ditch. And then you've got clear over here the full terrestrial. That's the area of influence outside of the ditch. So there are a zillion, not a zillion, there are a lot of different chemicals that you can use inside the ditch. And this applies, I'll talk even in the ditch, what you can and cannot use. And what makes an irrigation ditch versus a non-irrigation ditch is simple that. If somebody is pumping water out of there to water, flood irrigate their ponds, or not their ponds, but flood irrigate their pasture, flood irrigate their lawns. They have a pump in there, a siphon hose going through a pump going out. That's all irrigation. We have just a limited amount of tools that you can spray over the top of the water. Okay, we got glyphosate, which is Roundup. We've got certain 2,4-Ds. We have diquats. We have triclopirs. I'm gonna get a little more into these a little bit within there. Now, in the zone B area, we have products that you can apply within the high water mark. So that would be from the water's edge to the top of the ditch. Keep in mind, the residual must be absent prior to water entering in this level, and you cannot allow your spray drift to get over the water. So you can be very careful in here. Most people do not apply in these sites. Okay, top of the ditch is kind of a zone C. Likewise, you don't want to allow it to drift over, but you can use a handful of products, depending on what they are, from zone D and zone C. But when you get in the zone C area, this is where you take a chance of getting more and more drift over the water. But if you're on this zone D, there's quite a few products that you can use. There's Whetstone, which is aminopyrrolid, also on the marketplace, known as Milestone. You've got Grassmaster, which is 2,4-D dicamba, straight dicamba, which is Banville, Vanquish, Flagstaff. We have here Gunslinger Amp. That's the Whetstone mixed with 2,4-D, and even Panoramic. I bring it Panoramic because if you get cheatgrass, Medusa head on your outer banks, you can use Panoramic on that to take that out and still leave your selective grasses out here. And then when you get terrestrial out here, just follow the product labels. Okay. Terrestrial area, your worst problem is just watch for sensitive species, desirable trees, crops, which whether it's alfalfa, potatoes, anything, corn, ornamentals, or any other desirable plants. We're going down that way. So look at a lot of the stuff inside the ditch. We talk about Alligator's product, glyphosate 5.4. Keep in mind that anytime you're using a glyphosate, a Roundup product, keep in mind that Roundup, you go down to like, your local hardware or Ace Hardware store, Home Depot, it no longer has glyphosate in it. It is a mix of a grass herbicide and a broadleaf herbicide. They've gone away from allowing that for most of the homeowners. But if you're going to spray over your ditch, I encourage you to go to one of your ag suppliers and ask them for a glyphosate-based product that can be used aquatically. Most of them, like our glyphosate 5.4, has no surfactant in it. So we do that because a lot of the surfactants that come in these mixes are not aquatically approved. So this gives you the option to go out and find your own aquatically approved non-ionic surfactants, but you always need to add it in there, okay? It makes a night and day difference whether that glyphosate is going to work. I don't encourage people to use a lot of glyphosate. Most generally, when the glyphosate plus 2,4-D is used, it's before the ditch is used in the spring. So you can knock down the grass, you can kill a lot of the broadleafs that are in there and help it so it's not, those grasses are not growing up inside your waterway and impeding your water. But yeah, I encourage you to always stay within the high water mark. Don't go outside and kill your grasses. Yes, it's a pain in the butt. Sometimes if it's like reed canary grass, timothy, any red top, those are all the grasses that are on the ditch banks, generally that are planted. They will fall into the ditch. You have to pull them out. You always have to burn them in the spring, do all that. But it's better than having the kochia, the Russian thistle, any other of these weeds, the mare's tail I showed you a picture of. They will move in, and then you're going to have a real problem. Leave the grasses there as a deterrent. Okay. Go to non-selective. You can actually use 2,4-D-amine over the ditch. All these products, as soon as they hit the water, they get diluted and they get destroyed by the sunlight. This product right here, IMOX, the chemistry in this is imazamox. This is an excellent product for using over in that riparian area and even over the irrigation ditch, in that there's no restrictions for using the water. When we get into triclopyr 3, known as Garlon, or the diquat, or even ecoimazapyr, known also as Habitat, these are residual herbicides. These you can put over irrigation ditch, but you must wait 120 days before you can use the water in that ditch. Why do I bring this up? Nobody can wait 120 days, because if you're fighting certain weeds, and we all know that the water either leaves in the middle of summer because that reservoir source ran out, or in the fall when all the irrigation's done, when the pond's empty, you can spray it then before they lose their leaves. And then by the time the water comes back in the next spring, you've waited your 120 days. So they're all tools that you can use in these riparian areas. If you get to outside your ditch, our go-to to control the white top, even willows, to control the musk, the bull thistle, the Scotch thistle, has traditionally been Tellar Escort. But these labels will prohibit you from making the applications on the outside of the ditch. So therefore, it's a tough situation. But as I mentioned earlier, there are other products you can use on the outside of the ditch. Just don't allow it to go over the water. AquaSweep is a very unique product put together by New Farm, one of another manufacturing company. This is a mix of 2,4-D-amine and triclopyr, and you can actually spray this one over the water. Now you still have the 120 days. You have to wait, but it's great for controlling a lot of species. It's even got a label for over lawns, pastures, and everything. So it's a great product. This Gunslinger amp, as I mentioned, is the whetstone mixed with the 2,4-D-amine. And then we have the IMOX here, can be used in the terrestrial areas as well. It's a great all-around herbicide. At lower rates, you get into higher rates. Now you're talking non-selection, and it will kill your grasses and your broadleaves. Other herbicides to consider if you're totally into the terrestrial areas. Let's talk a little bit about a lot of the mustards that we're dealing with. Dyer's Woad is one that I bring up. It is far as I know, only in one or two small patches in Montana, mostly up there. Yes, thank you again from Idaho. The hoary cress, the white top is a mustard plant. Perennial pepperweed and hoary cress are both lepidium species. Hoary cress, as I mentioned, is blooming now, and it stays usually about 12 to 18 inches tall. Perennial pepperweed is its big brother. It doesn't really start blooming until late June. It'll get taller, about 3 foot tall, but it is, both of these are rhizomatous, meaning, again, connected roots, mustard plants. So, and then we have another one that is showing up. This one, once again, came from Idaho. We keep sharing things. You share your tourists with us. We'll share weeds with you. But they're all mustards, and I'll get into what you want to do, what you want to use to control those along your way. Hordeolism is a very aggressive annual mustard that is actually toxic to horses. We have a lot of biennial invaders. We talked about musk thistle, the bull thistle, the Scotch thistle, and in a lot of our riparian area where you've got either livestock or where the deer, coyotes, elk, antelope are moving in and out of the range into there, there's another very invasive noxious weed called the hound's tongue. It's that little burr that's about the size of your pinky fingernail that loves to attach to your shoelaces, your dog, your blankets. It'll attach to about anything, and it takes a ride for miles and miles away. So we're after the mustard control. We're going to use the closulfuron and the escort. If we're going to be, or even metsulfuron, MSM, escort. Keep in mind, I like closulfuron. It's a little more money. It has a longer residual. It's actually safer to a lot of the trees and shrubs in your riparian area, and it is very effective. The metsulfuron, the MSM60, known as escort, is pretty hard on your grasses. If you're up in your rangeland or you're in these pastures where you have some of the native fescues and ryegrasses, you're probably going to kill them. You will yellow them, and it's hard to get them to grow back in. So I do caution you that. Look for the tillip. They are very slow acting. You can spray them when the seeds are starting to be produced inside that flower head, and that chemistry is unique, where it will take out about 80% of the viability of that seed. So very nice, very good for a cleanup type situation. You can spray it, as I mentioned, early spring to seed set. Talk about asters. Majority of our really bad weeds are asters. That would be all the thistles, including the Canada thistle. Let's talk about what you see along the roadways and a lot of places where it's disturbed. Another native plant called curly cup gumweed. This is that one that gets a yellow flower, but underneath the flower, it's really sticky and the stem's sticky. We have wild sunflower. A lot of times that gets to be a problem in our landscapes. All of the knapweeds, spotted knapweed, Russian knapweed, diffuse knapweed, and even another one that's really not found out and around, yellow star thistle, is actually in the knapweed family. And then we do have another aster that I talked about, rush skeleton weed. Okay, with all the thistles, we're going to be looking at the Prescott, the clopyralid triclopyr combination. We've talked about whetstone. There is a mix of escort mixed with the milestone from Corteva company called Open-Site. This is a dry product that you mix into a liquid and off you go. And all of that, and you can go from early spring up to ground freeze. Fall application with a lot of these asters is the best time to do it, and that is fall after that 26-degree killing frost. You have to wait till then. All of these plants that are perennial start pushing all of their nutrients, all of their energy to the roots. You apply these systemic herbicides, they go down into the root, and you get a very clean field the next day. Okay. 2,4-D amines. I like to use the amines. I don't like to use the esters. The esters cause too much problems when it gets warm. Like right now, we're starting for this weekend, getting closer to 80 degrees. I'm over in Western Idaho right now, but you start to get to 80 degrees and you don't want the esters, and that would be dicamba is volatile and the 2,4-D esters are volatile as well. They can pick up and move later on that day when the plant starts to transpire or sweat. But 2,4-Ds are good for killing up the piranha plant. They're really good at knocking back and stopping the plant from doing any continued growth. You can look at Taskmaster. This is a lower form of volatility, so you get the kick out of the Banville, the dicamba, without it having to worry about the temperature. If you're getting kochia, Russian thistle into these areas, these transition areas between the sagebrush or even roadside, your lawn, your pasture, into the riparian, kochia and Russian thistle are the tumbleweeds, and they are tough. You really need to stick to the dicamba, the fluroxypyr combinations, the flagstaff, and always mix it with 2,4-D or other products to manage that resistance issue. Okay, so I'm hoping that makes sense to a lot of you. All the different products you can use, there's a million of them. There's a lot of people out there that can help you pick the products of each, but in a nutshell, in a lot of your areas where it's waters of the US, you can go right to the water's edge with all of those products, but to the ditch banks, you got to stick to the outer banks or the top out. And so mind that list that I had and to know what you can use where. But one of the things that was discussed is to talk to people about how do you get the best spray out of your equipment. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the equipment very vaguely, but I want to talk about calibration. The question that we get all the time as county weed people, I'll tell them how to use the whetstone and they say, well, how much do I put in my tank? We can't tell you that until we know how far your tank's going to spray. Roundup was really good for years, telling you put in a 2% solution. And that's just a good way for them to sell a lot of product when it goes out there. But I'm going to talk a little bit about backpack sprayers. We can talk about ATV, UTV sprayers, truck mounted sprayers. I'm even pretty knowledgeable when it comes to dealing with crop dusters, the fixed wings, helicopter, and now the up and newest that you can get in some of these areas are drones getting into there. So backpack sprayers. Now here's a picture of me. If you really want to go up and have some fun, drop into Hell's Canyon off of the Oregon-Idaho border. The far side of this over here is Idaho, and this is Oregon. But we're dropping in there to go after a very brand new invasive species called Turkish thistle. It's on everybody's hot list. But steel backpacks, I've been with using steels forever. They're one of the best. You better be a good 6'2", 240-pound guy, because that's a 5-gallon backpack sprayer. But we get into that ATV sprayers. Most people that are setting up ATV sprayers to do it on a large scale, you can see here, these are with boomless nozzles. From one end of this pattern to the other is 30 feet. There are 2 tanks on here. This is a custom built sprayer that I built when I was a county weed guy, and very efficient at doing that. But if you're going to go spraying into these areas, in the front of this, you can see the handgun. You use a handgun a lot off of an ATV so I can get in there and spot treat and be very selective in what we do. But in the open areas where we've got a lot of weeds, I want to be able to use a boomless nozzle without reaching out and smacking a tree and either tearing it off or affecting the spray pattern. All righty. And then there's always the good old truck mounted sprayers. Most of the sprayers have a big old hose reel on it, 300-foot hose. You can see one applicator is managing the hose, and the other applicator is actually down inside of a ditch. This was a fall application after the water went out, and we're using the imazapyr and or triclopyr trying to kill a lot of brush along here because the stitch company came through and cut down a lot of trees. And as usual, if you don't treat the stump, immediately after you cut that tree, everything suckers back and you've got a worse problem. But you see the good guy down in here trying to spray all that out, and he's having a good time. Okay, a lot of obstacles. Let's talk real quick. I've got maybe about 5-10 minutes. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. Calibration is key to anything. This is the most efficient cost savings area you can do it. Right product, right rate, at the right timing. This protects and does everything. We are going to go through a simple little calibration thing. And it's calibration is simply getting a known amount of material over a known area. First thing you're going to do is make sure your sprayer is working properly. Best thing to do if you have an ATV sprayer is to go out and spray the asphalt. Turn on your boomless nozzle or your boom, drive a little bit and make sure it's drying on the asphalt equally. If not, then you've got issues. Go out there and practice your calibration on the asphalt. You can watch it dry and see how bad your seesaw or Z pattern is and try to cut down and limit a lot of that. But what you're going to do is you're going to measure, let's say, 1,000 square feet. You can pick an area, but I like 1,000 because it's big enough to train. Keep in mind that a lot of people say, well, I don't ever spray 1,000 square feet. I'm just out squirting a plant after a plant after the plant. Keep in mind when you're spraying back and forth, what we're calibrating is actually this motion of your hands over and how long that spray pattern is staying over the top of the plants. That's what we're calibrating. And then when you go out in the field, you know, to just keep it at that same rate, you'll have the right stuff. Then you want to time how long it takes that spray area. And then you want to take, for the same amount of time you sprayed that 1,000 square feet, you want to just say, go, put it in a containing basin of some time, collect it for the same amount of time. Okay. And then you're going to measure that amount. So now we have a known area of 1,000 square feet and we have a known volume in a container. This is where everybody gets confused, is the calculations. Okay. Everything I'm showing you here, I have on a form. So if you'll email me or I can send it to Rebecca, she can send this to you and it walks you through this and you put in the numbers and you sign your name to it. Because as a professional applicator, you have to keep track legally from the EPA, you have to keep track of when you calibrated your equipment and your employees. Let's talk about the calculations. Remember, our end goal is to figure out rate per acre or gallons per acre, because the herbicides are all going to tell you, you put this down at 7 ounces, for instance, with whetstone, 7 ounces per acre. Now you need to know how much it's going to go. So that our end goal, we need gallons and acres. So for the gallons, you take the amount of collected in ounces divided by 128. That's ounces per gallon. So in our example, let's say it took 40 seconds to collect what you sprayed on that 1,000 square feet. So you take 40 ounces, gives you 40 seconds, gives you 100 ounces. You divide that by 128. Now we know that we collected a 0.781, carried out 3 places if you can, gallons. That's one number. Now, our acres. Let's talk about the 1,000 square feet divided by 43,560. That's how many square feet are in 1 acre. So we take 1,000 divided by 43,560. You have 0.0229 acres. Write that down. You'll always know how many acres is in 1,000 square feet. Okay. So our end goal, therefore, is to use 0.781 divided by the 0.0229. Tells us that we're spraying at 34 gallons per acre. This will work with the little hand pump, single gallon hand pump up to the great big trucks. It's all the same. And now you take that paper, when you figure this out, like I said, tape it to the inside of a cupboard in your garage, your shop, anywhere you can go find it. So the next time you come back and you need to mix some herbicide, you've got that number. So it's not rocket science. We're going to start and just say, hey, 34 gallons per acre. We don't need to know the one. So now, how much do I put in my tank? So now that I know I'm at 34 gallons per acre, and I'm just going to pick 240 amine. We usually use that at around a quart, 32 ounces per acre. So you take the size of your tank divided by your rate per acre. So in this case, 4 gallons divided by 34 tells me that each spray tank is going to treat a 1/12 of an acre. So I'm going to take my quart rate per acre divided by 12 tells me I'm going to put 2.6 ounces of 2,4-D per full gallon of backpack. Remember how I said Monsanto came out with putting in a 2% solution? If we figured this whole thing out, and you can put 2,4-D in your tank in a 2% solution, which is, you know, keep in mind a gallon's 128 ounces. So if you're at 2%, you have 1.2 ounces times 2. That's 2.4 ounces per gallon. And if you take that times 5, that's 10 ounces of 2,4-D when you can get away with 2.6. You're going to get the same weed control. And in fact, if you use whetstone that way, you're off label because you can't grow that high. Here's what the paper looks like on that one. I also have one just as well for boom sprayers that calculate everything with additional nozzles and then the whole 9 yards. Okay. We can get it sent to you. I'm pretty much running out of a little bit of time here. Rebecca, I'll let you chime in if you want me to keep going a little bit. I can talk on a few more issues, but we wanted to leave time for questions and answers. But guys, the biggest thing I want to leave you is a take-home message. You have weeds. Your neighbors have weeds. Work together. Your weed program is no stronger than your neighbors. So if you're going to go out and do weed control or bring somebody in to spray weeds, communicate with your neighbors. Everybody work together. Everybody can clean it up. This site right here, this young lady's actually out with a GPS unit mapping it so we could document it. We came in that in about 2 weeks and sprayed this, and the next year it cleaned it up with that Telar full sulfur on up there and that way. So with that, Rebecca, I will take questions.